I still remember the sound the envelope made when it slid across the kitchen table. A soft scrape. Almost innocent. My stepfather, Morris, nudged it toward me with 2 fingers, like he was handing me a birthday card. My mother stood by the sink watching us, drying her hands on a dish towel, trying too hard to look relaxed. I didn't open the envelope right away. I could feel something wrong in the room. A heaviness. A silence that wasn't silent at all, because it hummed beneath my ribs like a warning. "Go on," Morris said. "Open it." I did. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A bank statement. My bank statement. Or rather, what used to be my bank account. Balance, $34.17. That was all. I blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake. For 18 years, my grandparents had saved for me. Every holiday, every birthday, every spare dollar, they'd placed it into a college fund with my name on it. When my grandmother passed, she left the remaining amount, over $120,000, to secure my education. It was the one thing in my life that had always felt safe. Now it was gone. "I used it," Morris said calmly, as if he were announcing the weather. "Family pulls together. Family sacrifices. You'll understand when you're older." I felt the room spin. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. She kept smoothing the towel over and over. I was 18. Fresh acceptance letter to a top university. A path laid out for me. And with one quiet theft, Morris had bulldozed it. "What did you do with it?" I whispered. He smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. "Invested," he said. "For the family. You'll thank me eventually." But I knew with a clarity that burned, that whatever he had done, it wasn't for family, and it certainly wasn't legal. My throat tightened as the reality sank in. I had just lost the future everyone believed I would have. What I didn't yet know was that Morris had also underestimated me. He thought I would cry. Give up. Move on quietly. He didn't know the woman I would become, or how far I would go to reclaim what was stolen. But that moment came later. Right then, sitting at that table with the bank statement trembling in my hand, all I could say was, "Morris, what did you do?" He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said the words that would echo in my life for years. "Family is family. And your money is our money." And that was the moment I realized I was at war. A war he didn't even know he had started. Because I wasn't walking away from this. Not ever. I hadn't yet discovered the worst part, the forged documents with my name on them. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I'm 61 years old now. I've lived long enough to know that betrayal rarely arrives with shouting or broken dishes. It comes quietly, in small envelopes across kitchen tables. It comes in the voice of someone who claims to love you. Someone who smiles as they take from you. When people meet me today, they tend to see the polished version of who I became, a retired legal assistant with a tidy little house on the coast, silver hair I refuse to dye, a life that seems calm and well-ordered. I host book clubs. I plant tomatoes. I feed a stray cat who refuses to admit he belongs to me. But beneath all that gentleness is steel you can't see at first glance. A spine shaped by years of choosing truth over silence. I didn't start life with that strength. I developed it. Slowly. Painfully. One betrayal at a time. My stepfather entered my life when I was 9. My mother remarried quickly after my father's death. Morris brought promises of stability, responsibility, and a steady job at a regional construction firm. To a grieving woman raising an only child, he looked like a strong branch to cling to. But even as a child, I sensed the small cracks. The way he corrected my mother sharply over nothing. The way he insisted on overseeing every decision, financial ones most of all. My mother called it leadership. Later, I learned its real name was control. Still, nothing prepared me for the violation he would commit when I turned 18. When I discovered my college fund was gone, stolen by a man who insisted he was protecting the family, something fundamental shifted inside me. I felt myself split, the naive girl I had been on one side, and on the other, the woman I would fight to become. At 18, I didn't know the law. I didn't know how bank documents worked. I had no attorney, no income, no clear path forward. But I knew one thing: people who steal always leave footprints. And I was very good at paying attention. The first footprint appeared 2 days later, my signature forged on a withdrawal form. Our house in those days was a strange battleground, though my mother insisted it was peaceful. She believed in loyalty the way some people believe in gravity. She believed it kept the world from spinning apart. But loyalty, when given blindly, becomes a weapon in the wrong person's hands. Morris wielded it like a blade. He framed every decision as what families do for each other. If he wanted to borrow my mother's savings for a business opportunity, it was because family supports dreams. If he pressured her to co-sign loans, it was because family trusts. When my mother asked cautious questions, he'd sigh heavily and remind her how hard he worked, how much he provided, how ungrateful we would look if we doubted him. By the time I was a teenager, questioning Morris felt like questioning the foundation of our home. My mother begged me to keep the peace, insisting that conflict made life harder than it needed to be. But peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's surrender. Still, I stayed quiet, for her sake, not his. I watched. Listened. Noticed things. The unopened bills shoved into drawers. The calls he took in the garage. The way he became almost frantic when the topic of my college fund came up. My grandparents had adored me, and they were disciplined savers. They started the fund the year I was born. My grandmother knitted a tiny pink blanket and announced, "This girl will go further than any of us." And they made it happen one sacrifice at a time. That money wasn't just money. It was love turned into numbers. Their hope made material. To Morris, it was simply an opportunity. He began his theft long before I realized it. But the day he sat across from me and declared, "Your money is our money," everything snapped into focus. My mother tried to mediate, but she was torn between loyalty to him and guilt toward me. She apologized constantly yet changed nothing. She wanted harmony, but harmony can't exist where truth is strangled. What neither of them knew was that I had already started keeping notes. Dates. Bank letters. Conversations. Patterns. I didn't know what I would do with them yet. I just knew I needed a record. Because one day the truth would surface, and when it did, I intended to be ready. And then the bank teller recognized me, and told me something that froze my blood. I walked into the bank 2 days after the envelope incident, still clinging to a shred of hope that all this was a misunderstanding. Maybe a clerical error. Maybe my mother had moved the account for safekeeping. Maybe anything except theft. The teller, a woman named Rose who had known me since I was a child, greeted me warmly. Then her smile faded when she pulled up the account. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Evelyn. I thought you understood what you signed." "Signed?" I asked. She turned the screen slightly, just enough for me to glimpse the digital scan. My signature. Or someone's attempt at it. A withdrawal authorization. Dated 3 weeks earlier. The entire balance transferred into an account with my stepfather's name on it. My chest tightened so sharply I had to grip the counter. Rose looked heartbroken. "Honey, you came in with him that day. You signed it right here." I remember thinking you looked upset. "I wasn't here," I whispered. "I never signed anything." She blinked, confused, then horror dawned on her features. Before she could say more, her manager approached, wearing the nervous smile of someone aware a fire was starting but unsure where to aim the extinguisher. He politely, firmly ended our conversation. I stepped out into the sunlight trembling, my stomach hollow. This wasn't just theft. It was fraud. Forgery. Identity misuse. And Morris had used my face, my presence, to commit it. I rushed home, the evidence burning in my mind. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look ashamed. "You were there," he said smoothly. "You don't remember because you were upset." Teenagers are emotional. Gaslighting. Clean. Precise. My mother whispered, "Maybe he's right, sweetie. Maybe you forgot." Forgot signing away $120,000? Something inside me fractured. Permanently. But the breaking wasn't weakness. It was a doorway. I realized I couldn't rely on my mother. I couldn't rely on the bank. I couldn't rely on anyone except myself. And I made a vow, silent, razor sharp, that I would reclaim what was mine. Not through screaming. Not through vengeance for vengeance. Through truth. Through proof. Through the kind of justice that doesn't need to raise its voice. And that's when I found the locked drawer in Morris's home office, holding far more than I expected. Morris kept a small filing cabinet in his home office, locked with a flimsy metal key he believed was secure. But he'd made the mistake of leaving that key in the pocket of his jacket that my mother asked me to hang up one afternoon. I took the key. I waited until both of them were out of the house, my mother at a late shift, Morris at one of his so-called construction meetings that always ran long. My hands shook as I unlocked the drawer, expecting maybe a statement or two, something I could use to start building a case. What I found was a miniature archive of his deceit. A folder with my name on it, stuffed with documents he had forged over the years. Permission forms. Account authorizations. Even an application to move my college fund to a joint account with him as secondary owner. My signature appeared on every single page, shaky and inconsistent, as if traced from memory. I felt cold all over. Behind that folder was another, my mother's name this time. Inside were credit card statements she had never seen. Loans he had opened with her as cosigner. A second mortgage on the house she believed was fully paid off. The final folder was Morris's. His private accounts. Buried debt. Warnings from lenders. Notices of default. A ledger documenting every dollar he'd siphoned from family members over the years. And tucked at the back, a letter from his company informing him he was under investigation for financial misconduct. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Morris wasn't protecting the family. He was drowning, and he had grabbed hold of us to keep himself afloat. I copied everything. Every document. Every forged signature. Every notice. I borrowed a friend's scanner late at night. I organized each file meticulously. And then I called an attorney, one recommended by a teacher who knew more of my situation than she let on. I stepped into that law office terrified but determined. My voice shook as I explained what had happened. The attorney listened without judgment, her eyes narrowing at each new detail. When I showed her the forged documents, she leaned back and exhaled slowly. "You have a case," she said. "A strong one. But you need to be prepared for collateral damage." I already understood what she meant. My mother. Her heart would break. Her loyalty would shatter. And she might blame me for both. But I pressed forward. Truth mattered more than comfort. Justice mattered more than silence. The attorney helped me prepare my statement. She contacted the bank. She initiated the process to flag the forged documents. But the most important step was the one she mentioned last. "We'll need to confront him. Legally, formally. And he will not react well." She was right. Because the day we served Morris with notice was the day everything erupted, loudly, violently, and irrevocably. Morris didn't just deny everything. He tried to turn the entire family against me. The confrontation unfolded in the living room, a room that had once been warm with family gatherings but now felt tight, airless, charged like a thunderstorm. Morris held the legal notice in his hands, crumpling the top edge as he read. His face shifted from confusion to irritation to a slow, simmering rage. My mother stood behind him, pale, trembling, eyes darting between us. He slammed the packet onto the table. "You think you can ruin this family over a misunderstanding?" he snarled. "A misunderstanding?" I said, my voice steady. "You forged my name. You stole my college fund. You lied to Mom. You used us to cover your debts." He jabbed a finger toward me. "You're 18 years old. A child. You don't understand how family finances work." "I understand exactly how fraud works." He barked a laugh, but there was fear behind it. Real fear. His bravado was cracking at the edges. He turned to my mother. "Linda, talk to her. Tell her to stop this nonsense before she destroys everything." My mother looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Evelyn, maybe we can handle this privately." "Maybe." "No," I said gently. "He stole from me. And from you." Morris grabbed her shoulders. "Too hard. Whose side are you on?" She flinched. In that moment, something inside her shifted. I saw it in her eyes, the first spark of doubt, the first fracture in the blind loyalty she'd carried for years. But before she could speak, Morris stormed down the hall toward his office. The office where he kept the forged documents. The office that was now missing half its contents. He discovered the empty drawer. The missing folders. The photocopied trail of his lies. His shout shook the house. He came barreling back, face red, voice wild. "You broke into my office. You stole my property. I'll report you. I'll destroy you." "You can try," I said quietly. "But the bank already has the documents. So does my lawyer. So does a third party who will release them automatically if anything happens to me." It wasn't a bluff. I had made sure of it. Morris froze. Not physically, his body was still moving with agitation, but something in him paused. Calculated. Assessed the threat. He had always assumed I was meek, compliant, easy to intimidate. But he underestimated the resolve of someone who has nothing left to lose. My mother sat heavily onto the couch, her face ashen. "Morris," she whispered. "Is any of this true?" He didn't answer her. And silence, in moments like that, is the loudest confession. That night, my mother packed a suitcase. She didn't leave him, not yet. But she slept at my aunt's house in town. She told him she needed space. And Morris? He made his first mistake. He tried to access my bank account again. But this time he walked straight into a fraud alert. And the investigation that followed would dismantle him piece by piece. The bank wasn't the only institution investigating him, his company was about to step in. Trouble has a way of arriving all at once, like a flock of crows descending on a single fence post. For Morris, the reckoning came in 3 distinct waves. The first wave came from the bank. Their fraud department opened a formal case. They requested statements, handwriting samples, timestamps from the day he supposedly entered the bank with me. They pulled security footage. They compared signatures. The evidence stacked itself neatly into a damning narrative. The second wave came from his employer. Unbeknownst to me, the financial misconduct investigation referenced in his private folder had escalated. Funds were missing from several project accounts. A whistleblower had come forward. And when the auditors dug deeper, they discovered transactions that linked to the same accounts he used to siphon my college fund. His company placed him on immediate administrative leave pending termination and potential prosecution. But it was the third wave, the one he never saw coming, that delivered the final blow. My mother found her voice. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where he had once slid the envelope to me, and laid out copies of the documents I had shown her. Every loan. Every credit line. Every forged signature. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply asked, "How long have you been using me?" He tried every tactic. Denial. Anger. Tears. Begging. Blaming me. Blaming her. Blaming stress, childhood trauma, poor memory. But my mother had woken up. Fully. Finally. She called her own attorney. She withdrew her name from accounts she'd never authorized. She froze joint assets. She filed a police report. And Morris found himself cornered. The man who once strutted around our home like he owned every wall, every chair, every breath we took, now sat in that same kitchen staring at the ruins of his own making. The criminal charges filed against him included fraud, forgery, identity misuse, and embezzlement from his employer. The combined weight of those charges was enough to crush any defense he might muster. His world didn't explode. It collapsed quietly, like a building eaten from the inside by termites. I didn't have to ruin him. His own actions did that. But even after the police took over, one final confrontation between us remained, one that would define the rest of my life. The final confrontation happened in the courthouse hallway 3 months later. Morris had been released on bail while awaiting trial. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Thinner. His once careful grooming now sloppy, his shirt wrinkled, his hair graying at the edges. But his eyes still searched for a foothold of control. When he saw me, he stepped forward. "You ruined me," he hissed. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined yourself." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think you've won? You think you're better off without me? I kept this family afloat. You drowned us," I said. "I just stopped going under with you." My mother stood at my side. Not behind me. Not torn or trembling. At my side. She had begun rebuilding her life, slowly, painfully. She apologized to me more times than I could count, and each time I told her the same truth: I never wanted to punish her. I only wanted her to see. Morris spat bitterly. "You've turned her against me." "No," my mother said softly. "You did that." A bailiff called his name. He looked at us one last time, as if expecting us to crumble or beg or regret. But betrayal has a strange side effect: once you see clearly, you never unsee. His trial moved forward. He accepted a plea deal. He served time, not much, but enough to mark him. Enough to remove him from our lives permanently. As for me, I rebuilt. Not in a straight line. Not easily. I worked 2 jobs. I attended community college. I transferred later than planned but still graduated. Piece by piece, I constructed a life that was mine, earned honestly, lived intentionally. Years later, when I looked back on the girl who sat at the kitchen table staring at an empty account, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Because she refused to let theft define her. She fought back with truth, not vengeance. With proof, not anger. And she won. But the story wasn't complete, not until I understood what all of it had meant. Now, at 61, when I tell this story, people often ask me whether I ever forgave Morris. Whether I think he learned anything. Whether I regret dragging the truth into the light. Here is my answer. Forgiveness is not a currency we owe to those who empty our pockets. It's a choice we make only when it brings peace, not to them, but to ourselves. I don't know whether Morris learned anything. People who believe they are owed everyone else's resources rarely change. But I don't carry anger anymore. Anger corrodes the vessel that holds it. I set it down long ago. What I carry instead is clarity. Families are built on love, not fear. On trust, not obligation. On truth, not blind loyalty. Anyone who demands your silence in the name of family is not protecting you, they are protecting themselves. My grandparents taught me that education is freedom. Morris taught me that documentation is armor. My mother taught me that awakening is painful but possible. And I learned something too: revenge doesn't require cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to be buried by someone else's lies. If you've ever had something stolen from you, not just money, but dignity, opportunity, trust. You have a choice. You can surrender. Or you can rise. And rising does not require rage. It requires courage. Quiet, persistent courage. The kind that turns an 18-year-old girl into a woman who stands tall in her own story, even decades later. If you're listening, I want to ask you one thing. What would you do if someone tried to rewrite your future? Because I learned that the moment you choose to reclaim your story is the moment the world starts listening. And the moment the truth starts winning.